Mates y fútbol. Tu dosis diaria de fútbol americano.
Es el mate buen amigo, mi mano.
Con el toque de NOHUDDLE y el análisis que te da una charla de mate. De lunes a viernes, disponible en iVoox, YouTube y Spotify.
Como dos buenos amigos, vamos juntos por la vida.
Hola, ¿qué tal a todos? Bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio de Mates y Fútbol, el podcast diario que tenemos en la familia de NOHUDDLE para hablar acerca de lo que siempre me gusta llamar como la liga más bonita del mundo, la NFL. Mi nombre es Agustín Esposito, es un placer estar con todos ustedes en este nuevo episodio de Mates y Fútbol. En esta ocasión, en una edición algo especial para las fiestas, para las navidades. Feliz Navidad para todos aquellos que no estuvieron siguiendo el programa esta semana y obviamente un feliz próximo año nuevo para todos. Está con nosotros RJ Ochoa, él es el director en jefe, el manager general de lo que es Bloggin The Boys, una página dedicada 100% a los Dallas Cowboys, parte de la familia de SB Nation. RJ, we're gonna do this in English or Spanish, this presentation as you like. It's a pleasure to have you here, and we're gonna talk about the Cowboys here, one of the teams that it's having a so-so season right now.
Hi Agustín, it's great to be with you. ¿Cómo estás? Mi español todavía es un proyecto que yo estoy tomando. Soy de el Rio Grande Valley en los Estados Unidos y mi familia es tan mexicano, si no es obviamente, y mis padres se hablan español y muchos de mi familia, pero cuando yo estaba un niño no quería practicar español, nada más quería hablar en inglés, disculpe, y ahora me creo que me hizo un error cuando estaba un niño y me gusta practicar, si no es obviamente también practicar los Cowboys y me tengo una pasión para hacer en español también. Yo sé que están muchas contentos y podcasts y cosas como tú y sus peers o sus coworkers que hacen contento en español. Yo sé que ya están contentos en español, pero yo me quiero poner mi hat en esa arena también. Y es importante para mí. Me tengo un hijo que está en 3 años y me creo que es tan importante para él que se verme hablando español para la raza o a que tú quieres. Entonces yo me tengo una columna que se pase cada semana que están en español. Me usa mi translator para ese y yo sabe que no es muy bien. Y también me tengo un video en mi canal de YouTube, Bloggin The Boys, que están en la idioma también. Pero todavía es un proyecto. Entonces lo siento por los errores que yo me tenía ahora.
No hay problema, lo pueden seguir a RJ y sus columnas en español en @RJ Ochoa en ex Twitter, y pueden seguir a Bloggin The Boys en @Bloggin The Boys, también ahí en la plataforma de X. So RJ, we're gonna do this in English so we can talk about the Cowboys and this season that has been upsetting if the word is fitting for you. What's the most upsetting thing about this Cowboys season? Because it's the Cowboys. They're always entering the season with high stakes, with high expectations for themselves, and everyone outside there has high expectations for the Cowboys. But what's the most upsetting things that has happened to Dallas this season?
I would say that it's actually related to what you kind of just said in your question. There are people, obviously, every year that feel like the Cowboys are going to win the Super Bowl or they're going to compete or, whatever expectation you want to put on them. I don't think anybody ever expects them to be as bad as they were. Obviously, they've kind of, calmed things down a little bit. But if you rewind to the beginning of the offseason, really all, you mentioned a happy new year, happy early new year to people in your introduction. Really all of this calendar year, not the football season, but all of 2024 has been devastating, has been demoralizing, has been disappointing. The way, obviously, the playoff loss went at the end of last season and the early part of the year, but then the way the Cowboys followed that up, teasing people I definitely don't know how to say gaslighting in Spanish. But saying they were going to be all in, doing nothing, delaying the extensions for Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb that they ultimately got done anyway, not getting an extension done with Micah Parsons. It feels like forever ago now, but all of the kind of lashing out, the fighting with the local radio hosts, back in the fall, it's been one big cloud of negativity that's been living over them. And so it has felt different to me, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm alone in that it has not felt like your standard season, to your point about having legitimate expectations. And so it has felt broken from before it fully began. And I think that's probably the most disappointing thing. It's really nice that they won these games around the holidays. We all obviously enjoy that, but they ruined the season, so early on. And this is such a fun time of year, and so many people look forward to this time of year. So that they broke it, and that they were the ones who broke it, is probably the most disappointing thing.
There's many things that went wrong, on the field. There's a lot of things that went wrong off the field. You should mention it. But what are the things that inside the stadium, inside the field, with the players, with Mike McCarthy itself guiding this team, has really backfired Dallas all season long?
It's difficult to separate the two because they obviously don't have the same amount of talent as the best teams in the NFL. We can sit here and say that something that went wrong on the field is their inability to run the ball early on. And a lot of that is on them, but a lot of that is also that, they didn't address the running back position over the offseason, that they brought Zeke back thinking they were the only people in the whole world who thought that was going to lead to anything positive, that they started the season with 2 rookies on the offensive line. I mean, they made it as difficult as they possibly could. And I don't say that to exonerate Mike McCarthy. He has his hand in it. I mean, he wasn't necessarily, calling plays in an elite fashion, but I don't know if you've ever seen it. This whole season was like an episode of Chopped, and hey, Mike McCarthy, here's a box of Fruit Loops, and here's a cinnamon roll tube, and here's some leftover bacon. So go make something delicious. And it was not easy, and Mike McCarthy has had his faults and his flaws, and there's a lot of that, to be discussed. But if I put the bulk of the blame on anything, it was on the assembly of the team, because they were behind the 8 ball from the very beginning. So they were constantly playing catch up.
There is similarity with the next off season of Dallas, with the past off season, where the positions or the groups that you must address to have a respectable team in the field are the same, are really the same that there were past off season.
Yeah, I mean, it's, people are already, I'm sure you see talking about tanking for a better draft pick, and then the conversation becomes, what do you want to do with that first round draft pick, whatever it becomes?
Yeah.
Pick whatever you want. I mean, they have needs. You could go wide receiver in the first round. You could address corner, certainly, because we don't know exactly what Trayvon Diggs is going to look like next year. You could still consider addressing the offensive line. It remains to be seen what they're going to do with Tyler Guyton. Do they consider, flipping him to right tackle, the position he played in college at Oklahoma? Do they want to address the defensive line? Do they want to take another defensive tackle? I mean, they have just a number of needs. And that's what, nobody wants to harp on last year. Nobody wants to just live in the past. But the damage you do by being so absent in free agency is really apparent, and really, really lives for several years. And so if they are inactive in free agency again, they're just going to continue down this road. They cannot ignore that avenue of team building, or else they wind up in the position that they're in. And this isn't unique to this year. This is how they've always operated. They put all of the pressure on a handful of players. These days, it's Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, and Micah Parsons to save them. And that's just, it's possible, sure, but it's not the best way to go about building your football team.
We're going to talk about Dak and see that were 2 major concerns, not only to the Cowboys itself, also for the fans. When does these renovations from the contracts of Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb was going to get assembled from the Dallas Cowboys. So they get it done. It is a good thing for Dallas to have under contract Dak and CD, thinking that Dallas may have to think about their immediate. I know there's some franchises in NFL that simply don't do rebuilding. Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, some of them just don't rebuild. They're just assembling pieces to see if they can put a better product on the field from season to season. But it's a concern that the contracts are larger than many people expected from the Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, and that's why, the story reached the point that it did last offseason, but they could have extended them both a year before in the 2023 offseason. And if you recall, that was coming off of the playoff win against Tampa Bay and then the loss at San Francisco. And that was the year that Dak Prescott threw all those interceptions. And so that was the first time they could have gone to Dak and gotten an extension done. And a principle that, I try every day to get people to understand is that if you're going to pay one of these top 5 positions, quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, left tackle, or pass rusher, when you pay your guy, he's going to be the highest paid player in the NFL. That's the way business works. If you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a car, if you want to go buy an iPhone, you have to pay the market rate, and you cannot get a discount. No one's going to take a discount because it's the Cowboys or whatever. That just isn't the way the world works anymore. And they don't understand that. Either they don't understand it or they're just that ignorant. And so they waited and waited and waited. To your point, they allowed Justin Jefferson to get his deal done. Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown even got another extension. They let all of these deals happen, and those continually raised the price at the wide receiver position. So when Dallas paid CeeDee Lamb, he got the biggest deal, and it was bigger than all of those. Dak Prescott, same thing. If they had extended him right after the 2022 season, it would have. Jalen Hurts was the first quarterback to get his extension at that time. He makes $52 million per year. Dak is at 60. You let Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa and Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, you let all of them get paid and raise the price. They are unwilling to understand that you have to. The $60 million that Dak is getting paid right now, people freaked out. I know you saw and talked about. The same thing happened when Dak got $40 million a year. And what happened? The $40 million ultimately became a bargain because the price continued to go up. And so it's amazing that they are in a position that they either don't care to understand or unable to understand this simple, supply and demand philosophy.
Yeah, I got to ask about this because, quarterback is a premier position in the NFL. It's always going to be the best paid player. Dak is currently the best paid player. $40 million per year doesn't seem like a lot. I know it doesn't seem like a lot now that quarterbacks make $50 million dollars a year, but at the time it doesn't felt like a lot. $40 million a year. I think 60. It's maybe because Dak problems with injuries or something like that, but I personally think that's a lot. I want your take on that. 40 million doesn't seem like a lot, but 60 million may seem a bit overpaid for Dak Prescott, which I think it's undoubtedly one of the best 10, 8, 7, including quarterbacks that they're in the NFL right now.
Yeah, when Dak got his $40 million a year, that was in 2021. And, the price, inflation happens. The salary cap is larger than it was then. And it's all commensurate from a percentage standpoint. The next quarterback to get paid will probably be Brock Purdy. Obviously, we'll see what the offseason has in store and what San Francisco does. But whoever it is, whether it is Brock Purdy or a year from now, whenever CJ Stroud gets paid or whatever, the next person will get $60 million per year or 60.5 or 61 because the percentages that we're dealing with are all the same. Obviously, $60 million is more than $40 million, but it's because the percentage that is available is much larger because the salary cap is that much larger. The NFL is so popular, as evidenced by the fact that your show exists. It is unbelievable. I don't know how much you saw or discussed, but I mean, there was this big debate on Christmas Day about the NBA and LeBron, obviously, about how the NBA owns Christmas.
Won by a lot. There are over
Yeah,
50 million people watching.
that's what, and the NBA played their Christmas Day games on standard cable. In here I don't know what the channels are. I know you obviously have your
you got, I think, two of the I think there were five of six games of the NBA that were on standard cable here.
And they were all on ESPN all day. The two NFL games on Christmas Day, obviously, specifically, were on Netflix, and you're still talking about dwarfing. I mean, the numbers that the NBA do. So that the NFL continues to grow. I mean, the week that we're in, we're recording on a Friday. We had two NFL games on Netflix. We had an NFL game on Amazon Prime. We have 3 NFL games on Saturday that are technically on cable, but they're not on standard cable. You have to pay for an additional package or whatever to have NFL Network or have NFL Plus or whatever your international situation is. I mean, the NFL is just making money hand over fist. And the rules are that the salary cap grows as the television revenue grows. And so there's a much bigger pie. So the slice is still the same from a commensurate standpoint that Dak is getting or that Brock Purdy's getting or whoever's getting. It just is now $60 million when it's 12.5% relative to being $40 million 3 years ago.
Yeah. I'm going to flip this to the defense, this Mike Zimmer defense that it had some positive things, I think, in this season, but almost everything around the Cowboys, but everything about the Cowboys defense has been negativity. In particular with the defense, which is rock bottom in a lot of categories in defense rankings. So, what's your take on this defense that just 2 years ago was one of the best defenses in the NFL, has a lot of upcoming talent that has been playing really, really well. Micah Parsons was one of the best players, not only in defense, in all the NFL. Trevon Diggs was a great corner 2 years ago, but I think injuries had kept him back a bit. What's your take on this defense?
I was very against the Mike Zimmer hire. It had nothing to do with Mike Zimmer, but he obviously has a relationship and a history with the Cowboys, and it just felt like they just called a friend. It felt like they wanted, they didn't want to do any kind of work. The only other candidates who they reportedly interviewed were Rex Ryan and Ron Rivera. I mean, even that list didn't feel like they were taking it seriously. And so I was just against the process of it all. And Mike Zimmer hadn't coached in the NFL in a few years. I mean, it just felt so impossible for it to work. Now, they are playing better as of late. Obviously, if you look at the totality of their season and their ranks in certain areas, they're really, really, really bad because they were that bad, for most of the year before this little run. So I'm at a point now where it's working a little bit, and I think it's admirable that it's working without Trayvon Diggs, without DeMarcus Lawrence, with DeMarvion Overshown hurt. Those are fair excuses. I mean, that we can certainly offer. Now, there are certain things that they have to improve upon, and a lot of that does rest on the same thing that we already talked about, and that you need talent. You need talented players on your roster that they just don't have at the time outside of Micah Parsons right now. So I'm willing to see this again. I'm willing to see Mike McCarthy and Mike Zimmer come back for 2025. Because the results now are pretty impressive. They have a turnover in 8 consecutive games. That never happened under Dan Quinn. I don't mean to say that Dan Quinn wasn't awesome, but that never happened. They have 6 different times this season recorded multiple turnovers and 4 sacks in a singular game. That's unbelievable. I mean, that is absurd. And a lot of that is Micah Parsons being amazing and DeMarvion Overshown playing well at the time. Amaris Liufau playing really well right now. But I do think that it took so long. It took 2/3 of the season for the heavy fog that was enveloping them to finally go away. And right around Thanksgiving was when they finally broke free of the negativity that you talked about. And it could be just about the football at long last.
You talked about the future of McCarthy, of Zimmer. This is a question that I gotta ask. In the NFL, when a head coach has the last year of his contract, you usually see that being addressed on the previews of the season, but this time it has not happened for the Cowboys. So what's on the future of the Cowboys with McCarthy, which you just said you might want to give him another look this season. Also for Zimmer, what's some future for them? Because there's some uncertain things on the very next future, on a few months from now for this team.
Yeah, I would say even just 2 weeks from now, right? There's a week and a half left in the season for the Cowboys. And then, we'll see other coaches fired and, maybe Doug Peterson in Jacksonville or whatever, and more openings will pop up and that will begin the official new part of the year. This is a complicated thing because I think that very often people who play or coach for the Cowboys get penalized for the sins of the past. We look at the Cowboys as, a franchise that hasn't accomplished anything in 30 years now, and we blame Mike McCarthy and we blame Dak Prescott, and they deserve their fair share of blame for the time that they've been a part of the drought. But Mike McCarthy hasn't failed for 30 years. Mike McCarthy isn't responsible for the decade of Jason Garrett, and Dak Prescott's not responsible for what Tony Romo didn't accomplish or whatever. So I think if we evaluate Mike McCarthy's 5 years, I think it's really fair to say he's done an incredible job. I think that it would have been, it was very difficult because the playoff loss was so chaotic, but you could argue that, and I did argue that he somewhat earned an extension after last year, and they should have taken care of it, because if they had signed him to an extension in January after the playoff loss, I understand people would have freaked out, but you would have gotten rid of this story that has dominated them all year about how he's in a contract year. And if you wanted to fire him, you just fire him. There's no salary cap for coaches. There's no dead money. I mean, this is a franchise that is that is the actual time where being the most valuable professional sports franchise in the world works to your advantage. But they didn't do it because, as valuable as they are, they're pretty stingy and they're pretty cheap. And so I think that when you assess the totality of Mike McCarthy's tenure, I think it's fair to warrant bringing him back. And then I think when you add layers to it and say, okay, well, who's available, right? Is there somebody really worth pursuing? Because Ben Johnson's probably not going to choose the Cowboys. I know that the Bears still don't look like a great team that you would want to coach, but I think I would rather take the Bears job if I'm Ben Johnson. Or who knows, maybe the Eagles flame out and they fire Nick Sirianni because they're sick of his antics. I would definitely rather have the Eagles job than the Cowboys job. You just don't know. So maybe you don't even get the number one guy on your list. Maybe you're not even number one on their list. I mean, it is a very difficult and risky thing to move on from Mike McCarthy when you don't really have a proper alternative. And so if I had to guess, I think he's back. I think they sell it, in the way that they like to, and blah, blah, blah. And I bet they probably ride it out. I don't think that they'll fire him before the contract is over, if it's a 3-year deal, 4-year deal, 5-year deal, whatever.
And also, McCarthy has three seasons where he got to the playoffs with 12-5 record. So it's a kind of positive thing for them to keep them there. I know there's some resistance. I have some friends here in Argentina that Cowboys is one of the most popular things around here. And they all want to see McCarthy gone, just as the Eagles wants to see Sirianni gone. It's a kind of patience that we have here. So if things don't work the way it should be for some teams like the Cowboys, I mean, it's one of the most difficult things in sport, and I want your take on that. The Cowboys have not been successful in 30 years, everyone is hoping for the Cowboys, or every Cowboys fan is hoping that for at least 1 year they get to the championship, the NFC championship. And there's a lot of steps for that. And I think the Cowboys, when they make 2 steps forward, they make 3 back in some way. I don't know if you view it the same way.
Yeah, I think this year is an example of that, right? I mean, you could argue that they should have said, well, we've been to the playoffs 3 years in a row. We've done this. Let's keep trying. I mean, call it all in, call it whatever you want. But they didn't. I mean, they just, the reality is the people who run this team are the 1% of the 1%. I mean, they are so inordinately wealthy, and they can treat this football team as this hobby that they don't even really run, and still, by a significant margin, beat everybody else in terms of making money hand over fist. So, I mean, if you think about it, why? I mean, if it was you and your objective was to make money, why would you work harder when what you're doing is working for you? I mean, and it's unfortunate for you and I and other people who want to see the team succeed. But I mean, that's just, there's no other way to explain the way that they operate at this point in time. I used to not want to believe that. Maybe I was, young and naive or whatever. But when you look at the way they act, I mean, so many things that they did were almost spiteful. I mean, they were bringing Zeke back, I mean, just things like that were so illogical that they were just them trying to do them their way. And so it's difficult, and it makes assessing them very difficult, because even if you just look at the 3 years that they went to the playoffs, again, I'm not suggesting that we hang a banner or throw them a parade because they won 12 games 3 years in a row, but they lost 3 playoff games, right? 2 of the playoff games they lost were to the 49ers, who we all agree are this almost dynasty, if not for the Kansas City Chiefs. The other playoff game they lost was to the Packers, who have proven that they are this legitimate dominating force in the NFC. What a shocker that they lost to these very, very, very good teams. It's not embarrassing. They didn't go out and lose to the Daniel Jones Giants in the playoffs or whatever the case may be. They ran into teams that we know, that we talk about as the very best in the NFL. They get no credit for anything they do right because they're the Cowboys and it's fun and it's easy to make, to make them into memes or whatever. But they took Tom Brady out of the NFL. They dominated that Buccaneers team. And I'm sure that you've probably argued with your friends or whoever, because nobody wants to act like that playoff game mattered. I mean, we think about the Eagles, and I don't mean to hate on them because I really do respect the way that they operate. But they have won a handful of playoff games now in their little run here. But that run in 2022, when Dallas beat Tampa, the Eagles beat the Giants. They beat the Giants. If the Cowboys beat the Daniel Jones Giants to get to the NFC Championship game, nobody would have given them a shred of credit. People would still be saying things like, so you only got there because you beat the Daniel Jones Giants. And then the Eagles beat a literal quarterbackless team in the title game to get to the Super Bowl. Does anybody talk about that? No, it's the Eagles are this team with all this playoff success and Jalen Hurts. And again, they've earned that reputation. I'm not trying to tear them down. But my point is the Cowboys have those same things that are true about them. But because of who they are, we just can't let go of the easy jokes. And that makes evaluating them so much more difficult because everything is so much more loud around them.
I have to ask this question. You can answer it politely if you want. What's your take? What's your opinion on these managers that the Cowboys have, on Jerry Jones and their family? I mean, they kind of they do it well on the business perspective. That's undoubtedly true. Cowboys still are one of the best franchises in sports in the world, not only in the NFL, not only in the US. They're one of the most wealthiest franchises in the world. But the product on the field has been failing for 30 years. I don't know if failing for 30 years is the right word to choose, but I'm going to use it. What's your take on them? What's your opinion on them? You can answer it politely. Answer it politely.
I don't think that I don't think they're as incompetent as people make them out to be. But I think that they are determined on doing things their way at whatever cost. And I mean, it's worked for them before, right? I mean, they built their football kingdom on top of doing it their way 30 years ago. And so if you hit the lotto like that, I mean, it would be, in your own mind, you would feel like it worked before, and so on one hand, I don't blame them for that. There's an incredible level of arrogance and narcissism that goes with that, obviously, and seemingly an indifference to everything else around them. And that's frustrating because we look at the Eagles or we look at the Niners or we look at other teams, the Rams, like that have approached roster building in a different way, and we're jealous. And some of that is just the impatience that you talked about. But I will say, I think that it sounds like such a prisoner of the moment thing to say, but I do think that this year, this whole 2024, calendar year, really, whatever benefit of the doubt you were willing to give them, they burned up by not, doing anything in free agency, by teasing all in, by trying to justify it and twisting the words around. I keep bringing up that they brought Zeke back. It's it's kind of a joke that they brought Zeke back, and he's not even the first person that they've done that with.
And
I mean,
it's the example of what this year has been for the Cowboys. It's
right?
example.
Exactly. I mean, and of course they brought him back and let him wear number 15. Like it was purely done to make them happy because he was one of their favorite people. But again, he's not even the first person they did that with. They let Jason Witten walk back in after calling games for an entire season and obviously not being great at it and start. I mean, be the primary tight end. This is an organization that runs on favoritism, and I don't think there's any denying that at this point in time. And that's not even a bad thing, but that level of operation isn't working, and they're so unwilling to change. And that's frustrating, and they've stumbled into some great things and some great players, and they have had some great successes. They're not the Jaguars. They're not, the Colts. They're not the Broncos even of the last decade. I mean, they have, a lot of what they have done is correct. I think that they sometimes in the chaos of it all get painted out to be like these idiots that just don't do anything right. But I think we would all prefer for them to walk away or step aside and let everybody else kind of handle things, and they just won't. And so I think that their act is really tired, and some of that is just because it's been 30 years. I don't know what your reaction was to the Netflix documentary trailer, but I mean, that's all they are at this point. I mean, they're just a group of people that loves to talk about the past. Like, we don't need to hear about, your high school days and your whatever the case may be. Like, it's so, I think that more people are fed up, and it's so much that people are even fed up with the variables that live around them. I don't mean to make this about like Stephen A. Smith, but like his whole bit is hating on the Cowboys. And even that has grown tired. And it's not his fault. It's just because it's been the same forever. Like, we all know, we've all watched this movie. This is the 14th Fast and the Furious. We've seen it all. The cars go fast. There are explosions. We're ready for something different at this point.
Yeah, they offer the same material for a couple of
years
for now. We're going to talk about the NFL. You mentioned the Eagles. I think the Commanders kind of take the position that the Cowboys might get in this year, but they have played exceptionally well. They were on point with the hire of Dan Quinn, in my view. It's a great coach. How do you see the NFC? There's clearly the Lions, the Eagles. I think the Packers and the Vikings belong to that conversation as well, that are really Super Bowl contenders there. But what's your view on the NFC?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, if Jalen Hurts is healthy, I think I would take Philadelphia to beat Detroit, even if that game is in Detroit. I give the Eagles a benefit of the doubt in terms of experience and having been there. And I do think we're starting to see the Lions lose a little bit of steam. It's just so difficult to play that well for an entire season. I mean, we've seen the Cowboys in that.
They're not getting healthy enough to the
right.
playoffs.
So, I mean, I think I'm kind of rooting for the Vikings the most. That stories. I mean, I know everybody roots for the Lions and whatever, but I mean that Kevin O'Connell is so great. But I mean, any one of those NFC North teams could win the conference. I think it's really the three NFC North teams or Philly. I don't think that either of us think that Atlanta, if they win the NFC South, has a real chance. Obviously, Washington doesn't. I mean, I would love to see Washington go to Philly in the wild card round and beat them. That would be really funny. It would make Washington very annoying over the offseason, but I'm willing to live with that, to have the Eagles bounced and have another 2 seed lose in the first round so the Cowboys aren't alone. But it is, I don't want to call it top heavy, but it's really just the three NFC North teams and the Eagles. It feels like it's going to be one of those four.
And in the AFC, well, you got the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes said it the other night. They're getting healthy on the right time of the year. They're getting good the right time of the year. If 15 wins wasn't good enough for this team. But you also have Buffalo there. You have Baltimore that really stomp on the Houston Texans. What's your take on the AFC? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to bet against Kansas City just because they're who they are and they've proven what they have. I'm not going to predict them to lose. I'm going to be wrong betting on Kansas City until, you know what I mean? But if it can't be Kansas City, if they finally slip up or if whatever happens, I would love to see either the Ravens or the Bills get there. I think that would just be, the Super Bowl is such a big thing, and we get to hear so many stories because it's 2 weeks of buildup and whatnot. I would love for, the Bills or the Ravens to get that spotlight, just because we've heard all the stories about the Chiefs at this point in time, and that's not anybody's fault. But that's why, I would love a Buffalo Green Bay Super Bowl, a Baltimore Detroit Super Bowl, Buffalo Minnesota, and I also would love that for in any of those fan bases. I think the best fan base Super Bowl is probably Bills Lions. You're talking about two teams that have never won it, that have been suffering for forever. So I think this is certainly Kansas City's to lose for obvious reasons, but this is probably the best versions of the Ravens and Bills that we've ever seen, and the weakest version of the Chiefs, even though they're getting healthy and better at the right time. I still, though, would give the benefit of the doubt to the Chiefs, which is just crazy.
Well, the Bills and the Ravens have the top two candidates for the MVP. I think if you want to go to the top three, Saquon Barkley belongs to that conversation. But in the top two, it's a quarterback trophy after all. So we got Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. My take is Lamar. I think he has done really, really well. And I know Allen has a lot more to say in the Bills wins that Lamar has on the Ravens wins, but he's magnificent. He's even better than his previous two MVP campaign. How do you view that?
I think I trust Josh Allen to win a game more, if that makes sense. But I think you have to give the MVP to Lamar. I know that's a weird way to parse it. It does give me further conviction, and I imagine you as well, that Dak should have won the MVP last year over Lamar, just because Lamar's numbers this year are so much far and away better than they were a year ago. And so it upsets me in that respect. But Lamar is just so it's impossible. You can't justify. You're arguing for vibes if you're arguing Josh Allen over Lamar Jackson at this point in time. So it's very difficult to win a second MVP, let alone a third one. Especially to put one, to win back-to-back MVPs, you have to so significantly outperform what you did the year before. And Lamar has done that. He's checked every single box. And so sometimes also, if you recall, obviously, the Ravens just played on Christmas. They played on Christmas night a year ago. It was a Monday night game in San Francisco. And the day before, so at that point of Christmas of last year, it was really kind of a Dak and Lamar going back to back. Yeah. And on Christmas Eve of last year, the Cowboys fell flat in Miami. And then Lamar and the Ravens stomped the 49ers. And it was this, oh my gosh, they just beat the big bad 49ers. And at that point, the narrative had shifted towards Lamar. Yeah. And so I do think that there is value in having a big, win, big performance. The fact that he surpassed Michael Vick for most rushing yards by a quarterback, all that, really sticks in the minds of the voters. And that it happened on Christmas on this big stage, and it was Netflix, and it was brand new and all this stuff. That's just such a tidal wave of narrative that I don't think Josh Allen has the time to overcome.
Yeah, and Daniel Hunter is still looking for his knees for what Lamar did to him yesterday. Last question, or last couple of questions. I know you went to Arizona State University. You got the Sun Devils in the playoffs this year. That's great. That's great. That's a great story. I really believe this is a big giant awakening right now in Arizona State. What's your take on that? Kenny Dillingham has done a great job with this team, a team that was this was a team that was preview to go last in the Big 12, I think, right?
Yeah, so this whole thing is very interesting for me. I'm actually actively a student at Arizona State. I'm finishing at long last my bachelor's degree, and so it's been a really fun thing to experience. I'm attending online, and so I don't live in Tempe, but obviously, I've been following along and been really into it, and it's kind of enveloped me in my return to school, that it's all happened together, that football's such a big part of my life. It really has felt, like divine intervention. Like I was supposed to be doing this at this specific point in time. And they are amazing. And you mentioned them, as kind of a sleeping giant. That is the common verbiage. For any of your audience that's not aware, most of these schools that you see, obviously this isn't necessarily the case for the University of Texas because Austin is the capital of Texas, but your Alabamas, your Georgias, your Penn States right now. You look at the other teams in the playoff, Oregon. They're located in towns that are college towns. They're small. They're difficult to get to. You can't necessarily fly in there. Arizona State is located in Tempe, Arizona. I mean, you can fly right in. It is a major metropolitan area with a lot of alumni, a really popping, area. And so it has been thought to be this sleeping giant in terms of a place that is in the right location, that has the access to potential funds. If they could just get good, if they could just turn the corner, that's been kind of the MO on Arizona State for years. And they did it. I mean, they did it in year one of the Big 12 after being predicted to finish last. Kenny Dillingham was at the time the youngest coach in college football, an alumni of Arizona State, who I'll join shortly. I'm very excited about that, obviously. I mean, the story is wonderful. I mean, the story is beautiful and crazy, and they are kind of the the resistance against the Sith, if you will, like, because so many people are so pissed off and upset that Alabama didn't get in, or that Oregon has to play Ohio State now. I mean, they are they are running counter to the elitism that surrounds the world of college football. And so they're really cool in that sense. And I previously went to Texas A&M University and didn't finish, but that makes this Peach Bowl very complicated for me because I hate them so much. And now, again, in my association with Arizona State, they're playing them. And so if they can slay the mighty, cash dragon that is the University of Texas, I mean, this whole thing will reach an entirely different level. I would not count against them. I mean, I would love for the Cowboys to draft Cam Skattebo. He has been so awesome for them. I don't need Ashton Genty in the first round. I'm very fine with Cam Skattebo in the 4th or 5th. And so it's all happening in this incredible way, and I'm really excited for next week. The games have been awesome. I think people complaining about them are just, determined to be mad. We got 4 playoff games last week on campuses that were blowouts, but would you right now, as you and I are recording, Oklahoma and go ahead.
If you compare it to the NFL, you have 2 playoff games in Christmas, and there were both blowouts. So blowouts happen. They're bound to happen.
And I agree with you completely, but like I was saying, Oklahoma and Navy are playing in the Armed Forces Bowl, and right before because they have to, they talk about all the players who have left in the transfer portal. So, like, do you want to watch this? Do you want to watch a Peach Bowl between 2 teams that aren't in the playoff, that have half their rosters that have gone elsewhere? Like, that isn't fun. I mean, it was, again, I understand the blowouts, and you're completely right on what Christmas Day was, but was it not awesome to see Indiana and Notre Dame in South Bend? Like, that was incredible. I mean, it was amazing. And people are surprised that the better teams won. That's the whole point. Like, we understand that the favorites won because they were favorites for a reason. And so I also am not certain if you and I were to have this conversation a year from now. My plan is also to go to grad school after I wrap up my bachelor's degree, and I'm really looking strongly at the University of Florida. So a year from now, I might be an SEC elitist and, might think that what I said right now is really stupid. But for now, I'm all about the underdog and all about the Sundogs.
I'm going to say this. I'm a Longhorn fan, so we're going to match up here. But it's a great story. It's a great story, Arizona State. RJ, thank you very much for your time, for your knowledge about the Cowboys, about the NFL. I'm really happy to did this interview with you, and you're welcome every time you want here in Mates y Fútbol.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me and for doing it in English. The Spanish is still a project, like I said, and one I'm excited about and feel like I've made some growth on. But I certainly don't sound as great as people like you. And so appreciate it. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, your family, and your audience. And anytime you want me on, just let me know.
Hey, we're going to do something. In 1 year, when you're in SEC school alone in Florida, we're going to test your Spanish.
I was at Texas A&M when they were still in the Big 12. And so, never won the Big 12 as an Aggie. My first full season as a Sun Devil won the Big 12. So it's a very complicated thing for me internally and emotionally. And so I've always rooted for A&M in the SEC, but I'm excited to root for Florida if that winds up being my choice. But yeah, so a year from now, all this talk about, I won't want 5 SEC teams in the playoff a year from now. We'll see, and we'll do it all in Spanish, like you said.
Ok, thank you RJ. RJ Ochoa estuvo con nosotros, lo pueden seguir en @RJ Ochoa en X, pueden seguir a Bloggin The Boys, @Bloggin The Boys en X también. Vamos a dejar aquí en la descripción del video para que puedan seguirlo tanto a él como a Bloggin The Boys. Mi nombre es Agustín Esposito, ha sido un placer estar con todos ustedes en este episodio de Mates y Fútbol. Feliz Navidad para todos y nos encontramos el lunes para seguir hablando de esto que es la liga más bonita del mundo, la NFL. Un abrazo grande para todos. Chau, chau.